I wanted to leave football with this, Brad. Josh Pate tweeted this out. He said, the biggest question facing college football in 2025 is blank.
Say it again. The biggest issue?
The biggest question facing college football in 2025
like
is
the
blank.
sport as a whole, or just like this upcoming season?
That's the question.
The biggest question. The biggest question facing college football right now is
right?
Tough. I feel like I have all my answers at all times, so it's really tough for me to find questions.
I have an answer. What do you think? It's the biggest question is how you allocate and regulate rev share and if you're going to put a roster cap on or not. Because the longer we go without knowing the rules, the worse it's going to get. So if you're going to make it the Wild West, at least tell everybody that's the case so you can prepare for it. And if you're going to put a bunch of rules on, then let's get those rules in place so we can start abiding by them and moving forward. Because like when you can pay high school recruits $25,000 a month to stay committed or to commit to your school, like I feel like we're starting to lose the plot a little bit. Not that I don't want these kids to get paid, like I do, and they should be getting paid, but it's like, God, like I don't know if I'm pretty confident saying not everybody's playing by the same rules right now, and I don't think that's the fault of the people doing it. I think it's that there's no rules.
So if I were to go just this season, I would think my biggest question is like, is USC actually back? If I was talking about like the season in general. If I'm going to talk about the sport overall, like what's the biggest question mark facing college football right now? It would be tournament expansion and conference alignment. What is that going to look like moving forward? Will we be expanding to 14? I think 12 is perfect. I like the format. I like 4 buys. 14 could make sense because then it's like a Big Ten champ, SEC champ get buys, and then everyone else kind of has to play it out, which I could like. If we move to 16, that's just like, what's even the point of winning your conference title at that point? That just defeats the whole purpose of like winning your conference. Doesn't even matter, which ties into my whole conference alignment thing. Like, if we're going to move to 16, let's get rid of conferences. First off, make it a
Super League,
Power 4, Power 5, whatever. Those are the questions that I'm facing in terms of like, what is my Phil Steele book that is organized by conferences my entire life? What is that going to look like moving forward? Are we going to continue conferences? I think it's a beautiful thing about the sport. I actually think we're in a really good spot conference wise. I like kind of the Power 2, SEC, Big Ten, just 2 super conferences, and then followed up by, a really strong Big 12 and a really strong ACC. Are they elite as top to bottom as SEC and Big 10? No, but are they shitty conferences? No, they're good, competitive, high level college football conferences, right? And the Pac-12 is trying to makeshift a conference right now with like Texas State and Boise State and Oregon State, and we'll see what happens there. But like
all the states,
with all the conference, Fresno State and
Colorado State.
We're gonna Sacramento State might weasel their way in there the way they're spending money right now, which is crazy. Cal State,
Pac-12 is like, no, guys, it's the Power 5. It's like, no, it's not.
And Texas State's like, here I am. Hey,
woo-hoo. State, yeah, Power 5. Yeah.
Shout out JG Kinney though. Shout out JG Kinney, all-time leading receiver at Tulsa, head coach over at Texas State. He's killing it over there. He's gonna be leveling up real soon. So I don't know if that Texas State move is the best idea necessarily, unless they're willing to put in the money. But yeah, we have 4 really strong conferences, and I do like where the sport's at right now. Like I would love to just like hit pause right now, because I like, as a West Coast guy going to a Big Ten school, like obviously I'm biased here, but love that the 4 best West Coast schools got into the Big Ten. Like a lot of people hated it. I liked it. It makes it coast to coast. I think it's beautiful and kind of, it sets them up in a position where they could overtake the SEC just with that national reach that they have. Obviously, the South is the South, and the SEC should dominate that. But like Indiana just got 2 Florida commits. I know UCLA just got 2 Florida O-line commits, 4 stars. So it's like, the Big Ten can always attack the South. I don't know how well the SEC can attack the rest of the country. I mean, they usually do to a point, right? When they're like 4 or 5.
I don't know. I mean, the guy who just committed to Alabama is from, I think, like Nebraska.
Yeah, I guess they do all right.
It's like,
I guess they do all right. So I guess it's fine. Like I if I could just press pause right now in terms of
I'm with you.
How college football could look like for the future, like I would do it this way, where there's you don't get the 4 conference champ auto qualifiers, just the top 4 seeds get auto bid.
Can we just stop with the moving parts? Like, I'm just so tired of the structure of the
let's stop changing the format every 2 years. How about that?
Like, can we just leave it and let it run? Like, oh my God, Alabama had a shitty team and got left out. Like, dog, there's another year. Like, we play this year now too. Like, but they're that worried that like things have gone so far in the other direction that if they don't get the arbitrary number of teams they need, then they're just going to get pushed out. Where it's like, I don't understand where the lack of confidence comes from, but I don't know. I digress. I want to jump into the chat here real quick, Brad. Read a couple. Get to a couple questions.
Wrap up football.
Yeah. Guy Herring says Florida State bad as they would beat Vanderbilt or bottom feeder Big Ten team.
Agreed. Like I think he makes a really good point here in the sense that I think one thing people really miss out on, like, yes, Florida State had a really bad year. They went 2-10, right? Like super bad, talented. Basically nightmare scenario for any college football season. Does that mean I think talent-wise, like as a betting guy, like I don't think they're a 2-10 team. I think they're a 5-7, 6-6, 7-5 team that just really got unlucky and wasn't really super focused, especially when stuff got really downhill real quick. They lost to Georgia Tech week 1 in a nail biter. Who's, by the way, Georgia Tech, if you watch them play Georgia this past year, really good team. And Florida State was hanging with them week 1, right? Obviously, that was neutral, and, a lot of things played out since then. But, like, the gap with this portal thing now, it's not like it was 3 years ago, where it's like you have these elite schools, and there's only, like, 3 of them, and they're just beating the shit out of everyone. Everyone's beating up. Like, everyone's, like, pretty good. It's kind of what I'm taking away from this. So, like, yes, I agree. On a given day, I think Florida could have beaten Vanderbilt or Mississippi State or, hell, even Oklahoma. And by that sense, probably could have beaten Bama on a given day last year. So it's, I totally agree. I think people miss out on the sense of the amount of parity that happens on a football field on a given day. Like, yes, they're good and they're very talented, so they make it look easy, but it's not. There's a lot of things that need to go right on a given play, let alone throughout a given game, to execute and get a win. So I think Guy Herring actually makes a really good point there.
I'll hear it. Interesting.
Like I do hate the term like would beat. I hate that phrase because it's like, yes.
I don't hate it.
Yeah, UCLA would beat Georgia on a given day. Yeah, Georgia would beat UCLA. Like, yeah, that's why we play the games. Like, yes, those things could happen. This is all hypotheticals. Like, I can't stand the hypotheticals, but like, yeah, people need to understand like football. Like, these things can just happen weird and right. Like, Bama's really good team. They did go 9-3, so they didn't deserve to be in the playoff. Like, that's the bottom line. Like, yes, I would probably, if I had to put them in terms of who I would bet on, if I had to rank the teams I would bet on, I'd probably have Bama in my top 6 last year. Doesn't mean I think they should be in the playoff. They went 9-3. They lost games they shouldn't have. That's just how it goes. Like, this is sports, guys. This isn't game. I think gambling's gotten way too into people's heads.
100%. 100%.
What sports is, rather than, it's not all about spreads, guys. It's not. The spreads are there for fun. It's not.
That's a phenomenal point.
The spreads are there for fun. They're not there to determine the outcomes of seasons. That's not why they're there. I'm done with that spew. All right, next.
John says, when was the last time Sig had a QB that wasn't in the running for Conference Player of the Year? I actually think technically it was Rourke, funny enough. I'm not sure if he was in the running for Conference Player of the Year or not. I'd have to go look.
He was definitely in the running. But I mean, that was probably the first year his quarterback didn't win the Conference Player.
That's what I mean. Like it's
3 years.
And he was 9th in Heisman.
Yeah, and he was 9th in Heisman. Yeah, so 9th in Heisman. I think he was at least in the running for Conference Player.
I don't know if he was all Big Ten though. I don't know if he was all Big Ten.
Probably the last time he didn't have a quarterback that was in the running for Conference Player of the Year. It was probably pre James Madison. So what, Elon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the answer to that one. I think that was honestly what are those questions that people ask that you're actually not supposed to respond?
Rhetorical.
I think John was asking a rhetorical question there, by the way. For IU to have a shot at the title, is anything more important than the O-line? Give Mendoza time and let him cook, right? Are they a potential defensive stalwart, an offensive juggernaut, or both? Given what we're seeing on the O-line with the amount of playable depth, we're at 8. They were about at 6 last year. It might be like 8 or 9, honestly. Live free to Johnny in the back end. Those are really talented backups to have, and I think are ready to play as redshirt freshmen, which is really exciting. But they don't have to. I mean, it's not like they're in a position where it's like, oh, we have to play these guys because they don't have anyone else. There's a competition being played out, and these young guys might beat out a Khalil Benson or something like that, and that's really exciting to see. And as long as Bosad's been there, the O-line has taken a huge jump year in and year out. And, I mean, if you watch that national title game with Ohio State and Notre Dame, I think biggest thing for me that showed out was the O-line play. I think you remember that first drive by Notre Dame. They drove down the field, just absolutely pounded Ohio State all the way down the field and scored on like a 15-play drive with very strong O-line play. And I think that's something that Indiana can get to this year. Can they bring it on the defensive side? I think that remains to be seen. You know, obviously Wheeler and Ratcliffe and Tucker, you know, they're not Power 5 guys. You know, they, as a recruit, like maybe as a collective, they can be elite, but you know, that Notre Dame game, seeing it live just really sticks into my mind, and just like the speed and size that come with that. I think Indiana definitely got closer, and they're a lot better than they were last year. So I guess to answer your question, the O-line is the trenches are always going to be the most important thing besides quarterback play. Honestly, it's the most important thing. And quarterback play takes you over the hump. Let them cook. I think they were a defensive stalwart last year and an offensive juggernaut last year. I think they're better on both sides of the ball. I think it remains the same.
I actually had a different answer for SoCal Hot Sauce's question. I do actually think there's something more important than the offensive line. I actually think it's the ability of the receiving room to get open against press coverage. And that was, I mean, the thing that we haven't spent a ton of time talking about, specifically about that Notre Dame game. And it was a problem in the trenches for Indiana. But they also had a lot of difficulty moving the ball through the air. Now, some of that was Rourke unable to throw the ball accurately. You have the cold. He's got 2 potentially season-ending injuries he's playing through anyway.
But thumb also was like broken thumb.
Yeah, too. That was the other. Yeah, the one of the thumb and the knee. That would be the 2. But Cooper and Surratt, for the most part, didn't do much in that game, and we're gonna need those guys to be dependable in these big games, or you're just gonna be able to send the house after Mendoza again, like you were Rourke. So it's imperative that at least one of those guys got significantly better at separating against elite corners, because it's going to take that for this Indiana team to get to the areas they want to get to. And I think those 2 guys specifically, and getting EJ Williams and the speed they have in the wide receiver room with the freshmen and with Charlie Becker too, to me, that's like, can we get pop plays? Can we make big plays? Can we take the top off the defense so somebody can't just bully us like Notre Dame was kind of able to do for most of that game defensively? That's what I'm looking at. It's like, well, like the Nebraskas, the Purdue's, like these mid-pack teams that just aren't as detail focused and as well coached as we are. Like, we're gonna beat the dog snot out of these teams. Like, I'm pumped to play Iowa. I'm jacked up to play Illinois. Like, but when push comes to shove and you got one-on-one coverage, can you win? That's what I'm looking at.
I agree.
I think we're going to be able to win.
And I think a really good sign from that is that, remember, first spring practice, Omar Cooper beat Ponds Deep. And, we were covering this team last year. Not a single receiver beat Ponds Deep all of practices last year. Up until all through fall camp. I think that was the big buzz going around, is that no one can beat Ponds Deep. And first practice comes spring, Cooper working on the speed, burns him by 10 yards too, if you watch the clip. So, that's exciting to see, and hopefully that can translate to actual gameplay.
Yeah, I'm excited. I say that to say that I'm confident in the ability of those guys, that I don't think I just sat on my couch and was the only person who noticed they probably need to work on these areas of their game. You look at what Omar Cooper specifically talked about doing, what guys like Elijah Surratt talked about improving on in the offseason. It's they're attacking those areas of the game. And those guys are dedicated football players. So I know they're putting in the work. And that's what makes me confident to even that's what I'm looking at. And I'm excited to go watch those guys perform this year. Philip says O-line is built with continuity. Illinois returns 5 O-line starters. Illinois gets O-line. We'll agree to disagree.
Agreed. I called it a toss-up, mostly on the sense that, yes, Illinois brings back a very strong O-line. Indiana did have to replace some holes, but they brought 3 starters back on a top 10 O-line from last year. Bring in, they have the 2 freshmen that are now redshirt freshmen that are now going to be playable, giving them very solid depth, as well as bringing in Sen Mikowski, brought in Benson. They also brought in Coogan. So all of a sudden, that's 8 really good O-linemen that they can work with and compete against each other and formulate a really good unit moving forward. So, yes, a lot of people probably will give the edge to Illinois. I think people are sleeping on this Indiana O-line big time. Big time. If anyone, I think that's probably, we talked about how people are sleeping on Coop. No one's talking about this Indiana O-line. This might be the O-line that takes us over the edge. It could be. It could very well be. I might be sleeping on them, is kind of how I'm seeing. I'm trying to be a little realistic with it, from year 1 to year 2. Obviously, I talk about the year 2 jump all the time, but these things do take time, but maybe this could be the O-line that finally actually breaks us through and gets us even more ahead of schedule than we already are. So, yeah, I agree to disagree.
John says Coogan is bringing 4 quarters of FU football to the O-line. 100% agree.
Love it. And then Philip said, should conferences require schools to spend a minimum amount of revenue shared in football and basketball? Yes. However, it gets complicated with schools like Northwestern, Vanderbilt, Stanford. Schools like that will have trouble doing that. But yeah, I agree with that sentiment. I think the minimum should be kind of, realistic for your grant. If you're going to keep, teams in Northwestern's a Big Ten school. To have the Big Ten without Northwestern would be really tough. I think as much of a, because when they're good, it's awesome. But usually they are kind of just you stop over them. But when they're good and they make the Big Ten title game, it's kind of electric. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of sick. And then John asks, is Phil Steele the new Hoyle? I don't know who Hoyle is, so I'm gonna say yes. But, Phil Steele.
I hope you didn't mean Doyle.
Phil Steele has been the most accurate magazine over the last 30 years now.
So. We can't see that. So
yeah, I know, but I tried my best. So yeah, he's the Phil Steele is the old Phil Steele. He's that guy. He's the GOAT. I highly recommend buying a book. And then Jay Wizzle's just being an idiot. Hey, Jay Wizzle.
Mississippi State, more like Mississippi bad. Boom, roasted. That's right. That's what Jay was.
Got him. Yeah, Sig is handsome these days. Obvious boy crush. Totally agree. CFP repeat, all about it. They need someone better than Benson. I agree. And that's why they have a Johnny, Austin Liebfried, and who am I missing? Drew Evans might be able to be back by fall camp. So that all of a sudden opens the door for Who would be the tackles in that sense?
Leadfried.
Could have, in theory, they could have. Well, because like Jay Wizzle, talk to me. Do you think Benson's playing tackle or guard? If you're still on.
Abel says in Pond's defense, Cooper knows everything about Ponds. He knows absolute vulnerability, et cetera, et cetera. I also think actually in that Ponds clip specifically, and Brad and I have talked about this, that may have had more to do with underestimating Mendoza's ability to throw on the run than it is about getting beat in coverage.
Okay, so he thinks he's playing guard. So in theory though, if Drew Evans is back, they can go Coogan, Drew Evans, and Bray Lynch that were the guards last year, and then just go Mikowski Smith at the edge. So then all of a sudden you have Benson, who's a swing guy, and then you still have Ajani and Leifried. And Ajani was going with the ones in spring, so like he's almost ready, if not cooked already, like ready to go, fresh out of the oven, ready to go. Slot him in there. Yeah.
Depth for days. That's
Jay Wizzle, the scouting extraordinaire himself.
And then, Brad, I wanted to get your opinion on this. I'd like to get the opinion of the chat, honestly, as well. But there was we can call it a scandal. We'll call it whatever we want. There was an On3, the person who ran On3's like NIL University and like was like their director of athlete development network or whatever he was doing. Yeah, I am bringing this up. He was a paid consultant for Tennessee at the same time as he was hired by On3. On3 came out and said we had no knowledge of any of this, and like that there was, but like clear, like, regardless of if they knew or not. At any time that you sat there and you're like, I can't believe how much of an SEC slant this website takes, and you're like almost think you're crazy for thinking there's some massive conspiracy where like they're actually working for the SEC schools. And it's like actually lo and behold, no, they are like the people pretty like the president of NIL University was working for Tennessee and in position to promote Tennessee while also having this position with On3. And it's I can't say I'm surprised. I'm disappointed. It's sickening. He's probably not the only one. And part of me hopes that like the Big Ten has people in there, but like, you know, it's like it's like you think you think you're crazy for screaming this is an inside job, and then it's like it turns out that there are people on the inside like not playing by the rules. So is what it is. But what were your thoughts on that, Brad? Because I know I was kind of the only one who really had an opinion about it.
So Jay Wizzle had one of my sentiments too. Tennessee and recruiting scandals. It goes together like peanut butter and jelly. Shout out the cash in the McDonald's bags at the official visits. That was awesome.
Shout out my half-eaten peanut butter and jelly.
Oh, there we go. It's electric. And yeah, no, that was awesome. Just seeing Tennessee. I see that all around. Like people talk about how Oregon pays On3 for good publicity, which makes sense. You know, Oregon's got fuck you money. They're totally doing that. I mean, it just you know, it doesn't surprise me. You know, I just bring back the old days when it was just scout.com and Rivals, and then maybe, you know, I think the early days of 24/7 was coming around, and you know, it was so wholesome back then. You know, they didn't have any agendas. They were just covering recruits, you know, and people were eating it up and buying subscriptions. That's all it was, and it was awesome. It was a great time. And now, you know, money hungry individuals kind of mess it all up, and people with agendas. And when things get too big, it gets a little more corrupt. That's just how things go in life. So. Yeah. It's just how
part of me is like, if you're not cheating, you're not trying type of deal. Like if you're not just trying to take over different parts of the influence game, then like you're not essentially doing everything possible to win. But it is cheating at the end of the day. It's like,
yeah. I make jokes about how I hope we're cheating, but I think we can win without cheating is the thing. You know, from what I've seen that was mostly a joke that kind of started when we started this podcast and Indiana was bad. Mm-hmm. And that was a joke that just kind of started back in the Six and Side days. I hope that we can win. Obviously, like if you're not cheating, you're trying. I totally believe with that. However, you know, I do believe that Indiana can win without cheating. I believe in that coaching staff to that level that they can develop, execute, instill culture to the point where they can win a championship in the next 5 years.
I'm with you. I full blown agree, and that's why we'll be covering it every week. If you're watching on Twitter or you're watching on Facebook, hop on over to YouTube. You can hop in the comments. We're interacting with the chat the entire time the show's going on. Also, please like, comment, share, subscribe to Indiana at the Voice of College Football on YouTube. We're chasing 500 subscribers before the season starts. I think we'll be able to get there, with plenty of time to spare, but we're close. So